Well, welcome. My name's Owen Bennett-Jones. I'll be just sharing this 45 minutes or so of discussion about what we've just seen. Just to briefly introduce the director of many other very well-known films as well, on Enron, on Hunter S. Thompson, on the film called Taxi to the Dark Side, and now this film, which has proven to be, I think you'll agree, pretty controversial. I don't know if you're aware that online that you can find the script of this film with annotations of criticisms of the film, which I don't doubt we will hear some of tonight. So I just want to start by asking a couple of questions before I throw it open to you. And the first was, why, whether you hesitated to make it. In a way, you came to this after the story was known, pretty much. Was it late? What was your feeling about that process of making that decision to do this?
Well, I was approached to make it, and I jumped at the opportunity. To be honest, I've done a number of films about events that were prominently featured in the mass media, and I've gone in after the fact to try to understand better what actually happened. So Enron was like that. In some ways, Taxi to the Dark Side was like that. Certainly another film I made called Client 9, The Rise and Fall of Elliot Spitzer. So it seemed to me that it was a very important story. It was a story I was very interested in. And I was interested in Julian Assange as a tremendously powerful figure who seemed to be somebody who was, a man with a computer and a laptop setting out to expose abuses of power. And I've been interested in abuses of power.
Why do you think you didn't get an interview with him?
I don't know. I think that I tried pretty hard, as Vaughn Smith knows. It may be that we got off to the wrong foot. When I first met him, which was here at the Frontline Club downstairs, I quite liked him, actually. But already Universal had announced that we were doing the film, which I did not want them to do, but somebody did. Somebody leaked it. And I came to talk to Julian. At the time, a lot of people were talking to Julian, wanting to interview him and to use his interview as clout to raise money for a film. And they would say, would you please interview me, then I'll go get the money. And Julian would usually say, well, okay, but how are you going to do it? And there would be some sort of negotiation about how the film would be done. When I first met Julian, I told him, frankly, that I was going to do the film whether he agreed to participate or not. And so he didn't like that very much. I told him I hoped he would participate, but he felt that somehow he should have more control over the process. So I think that's one of the reasons. We had a long negotiation. It took place over a year. I think by the end, to be honest, my view is that what Julian was really looking for was not some kind of rationale for why he would do the interview. I think he was looking what he calls intel. He wanted me to give him information. And so negotiations broke down, as you saw here.
Give him information on?
Whatever. He wanted me, as I discussed here, and he had asked it a number of times, to give him information on all the other interview subjects in the film, which I found a rather odd request for somebody so interested in source protection. But nevertheless, that's one of the things that he wanted.
As I say, there has been a lot of criticism of the film. We'll doubtless get into that. Do you feel you've done a fair job?
I do. I've read the annotated transcript, which has been released. And it was originally released, actually, in a way that was, I would regard, somewhat typical, in the sense that it was released as if it had been a hack. In other words, as if somehow WikiLeaks had penetrated my organization. I will admit my organization is rather smaller than a gas station with two very bright attendants. But nevertheless, I thought that had happened. But I realized what had really happened was that somebody had a tape recorder at a screening of the film at Sundance and tape recorded the film and transcribed it. Unfortunately, that meant that fully 1/4 of the film was left out of the annotated transcript because, as you know from having seen the film, all of Bradley Manning's chats are written but not spoken. So the transcript itself was not exactly performed according to the principles of scientific journalism. So, and I've read the annotations, and there's not one in there that makes me feel that we were factually incorrect in any way.
Okay, so let's throw this open, and if people could say who they are and just wait for the microphone to come, there's one there, and just say who you are before you start.
Thank you, Ethan. I'm a Bradley Manning supporter. It's quite clear that you're very sympathetic to Bradley Manning in the film. You have a lot of sympathy for him. But one of the things that troubles me as someone who's been following the case quite closely, and about how you claim to be a supporter of Bradley Manning, is that for the most part, the details about the narrative about Bradley Manning and about the alleged disclosures are for the most part lifted from Major Ashton Fine and the prosecution claims in the pre-trial hearings. For instance, the claim that Bradley Manning worked from the so-called most wanted list, which I'm sure you're aware, 2 weeks ago in Bradley Manning's actual trial, the so-called forensic evidence as to that claim has fallen apart on the witness stand under cross-examination. And there are many other examples of this, actually, in the film that you've used. And I wondered how it was that you could defend using the claims of the prosecution as the timeline for events in your film, which would seem to violate the cardinal rule of court reporting, if you like. Thanks.
Thanks. I beg to differ. I don't think that I use the claims of the prosecution in any way to represent the chain of events. All of Bradley Manning, I used Bradley Manning's words to express how Bradley Manning thought about it at a time when he was representing these events to Adrian Lamo. The most wanted list is something I present as part of what Julian Assange was doing in terms of publishing it. And he was showing it as you can see in the film. I mean, it's not a secret. So I don't think there was any prosecution contention. We did get some information from the pretrial hearings, but that's publicly available information which we presented as part of the case.
But this is obviously a central legal issue, isn't it, as to whether WikiLeaks was soliciting this information. That will make a difference in law.
I'm not sure it will. I mean, here's where I take exception to this idea. There seems to be some concern on the part of Julian Assange, never mind Bradley Manning. After all, Bradley Manning has pled guilty to leaking material. There seems to be some concern on the part of WikiLeaks that somehow it's a bad thing if it's discovered that there was even any either solicitation or crosstalk between WikiLeaks and Bradley Manning. Frankly, that's what journalists do. They solicit information. Who's the guy? I'm having an idiotic blackout at the moment, but All the President's Men. Who are the two journalists?
Woodward and Bernstein.
Okay, so Bob Woodward does this all the time. He solicits information from officials. He actually encourages them to leak classified information to them, and he does it, and he gets it leaked to him all the time. So I don't think there's any problem whatsoever in terms of.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of that.
Yep. So, sorry, I was just trying to organise the mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, I take your point about how there might be some concern on WikiLeaks' side, but it's not really immaterial to the Bradley Manning case. Actually, as we know, Bradley Manning made a partial admission, but the U.S. government is still trying to prosecute Bradley Manning for much greater offences.
I agree.
And part of the evidence that the U.S. government is bringing against Bradley Manning is that he was working from that sheet. And actually, 2 weeks ago, the defence, on cross-examination, determined from the forensic witness that there was no evidence that Bradley Manning had ever seen or copied or consulted that document. So I think I'd just like to make the point that I think it might be irresponsible to have put that detail in, which is a prosecution claim, and that you might bear a responsibility not only to your audience but to Bradley Manning himself to issue a correction.
Okay. Just let me take this point. I presented Julian Assange showing the most wanted leaks. I don't believe I say anywhere in the film that Bradley Manning found the most wanted leaks.
You
do. And what do I say?
You say, working from the most wanted list, he conducted searches for certain files.
I see.
And you show on the screen.
Okay, we go off by that. So
Okay.
you're claiming, yeah, you did. So that's the response.
Okay. So my view would be that my view on that would be that the point here is that I don't know how to say this best. It's clear to me, if I got that wrong, and I'm not 100% certain that I did, but if I got that wrong, to me, this is not an issue about whether or not, my view about the aiding the enemy charge is something completely different. In other words, the government is now trying to prove that Bradley Manning was a spy, and in some fundamental way, he aided the enemy. There's no logic about that case that has anything to do even with this issue. The issue is whether or not he intentionally meant to give comfort and aid the enemy. That's why they're bringing all sorts of prosecution witnesses on board to say whether or not some of the WikiLeaks data ended up on Osama bin Laden's computer. I think that's an utterly fallacious and ridiculous claim on the part of the U.S. government. And I don't think there's anything in the film that would endorse that claim.
Okay.
You can jump all over me as much as you like, Owen. I've worked at 6 human rights groups since the early 1970s. I've known people out of psychiatric prisons in Russia, people who went through the Dia Desaparecidos. In Latin America, I represented Vanunu for Index on Censorship in front of the Israeli Supreme Court. It's a case that resembles quite a lot Assange's. I think your film is cowardly and naive. I think your separation of Bradley Manning from Assange and what they did is really quite evil. You start off here, the crime against the world that Hillary Clinton's talking about is invasion of 2 countries in which 1 million people died. This conspiracy you seem to portray WikiLeaks as being is the 1.2 million people with top security clearance in America, left over from the Bush regime, who are still in place now, and Obama's having to deal with that right now. Why all media people are preoccupied with celebrity? I mean, I said to Julian the first time I went in to see him, you're doing the right thing. Mordecai has been a saint in Israel and he's being forgotten. You're right to play it this way. He does the celebrity for that reason. Why have you put him on rocking around in rock parlors, looking at himself in mirrors? I'm sure you've looked at yourself in mirrors too. This man is not a narcissistic, twisted, ambitious person. This is a person who's on a vendetta for the world. And he's been absolutely consistent to it. And the fact that Snowden went to him right away, they went very quickly to WikiLeaks, shows that nobody's fooled by your kind of approach. You blew a great chance. And the reason he asked for the $1 million is because he's still trying to run WikiLeaks. He's not some sort of grub. You went to the press with that, I believe. Why would he not be angry with you, for God's sakes? You've humiliated him in the press.
I don't know how you want me to respond to that. I mean, it wasn't really a question. My view is...
You've misunderstood what Bradley Manning did if you misunderstand what Assange did.
No, I think there is a difference between Bradley Manning and Julian Assange. First of all, there's a technical difference between the two. Bradley Manning was the leaker, Julian Assange is the publisher. Second of all, I believe that we're entitled, all of us are entitled and deserve an opportunity to look at the whole truth. And just because somebody tries to right a wrong, or just because somebody tries to hold powerful people to account, it doesn't mean that that person is then above the law or is entitled to speak lies to power instead of truth to power. And I believe in this context, what this film tried to do was to disentangle those issues. And I believe, sir, that there are a number of people who are giving Julian Assange too much of a break and letting him off the hook on too many issues, and allowing us to have to believe, for example, that it's okay, that it's okay, for example, to endorse the vilification of 2 Swedish women because we stand for transparency.
I've heard from somebody very close to Hillary Clinton that was a CIA hit. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Okay, you've heard from somebody close to Hillary Clinton that that's a CIA hit.
You again, believe me.
Okay, fine. But there's no evidence. As soon as you can show me evidence, I believe in evidence.
As soon as you can evidence, you're just telling a block of nonsense. That's
I see.
propaganda.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
There's one more at the back there. Have you got a mic as well?
Hello.
Great.
Well, you've just mentioned about evidence.
Could you just actually, it'd be good if everyone, could you just say who you are?
Oh, I'm Deborah. you talked about evidence, and you've talked about we all have the right to see the full truth.
Yes.
Now, I've seen in comments in reviews of your film that condom, that torn condom that you show on screen, and you use to produce this story that Assange has got some weird compulsion to impregnate women. I've read that 2 pages on from that photograph, in that forensic file, it says that there was no DNA whatsoever on that condom. How can you possibly justify not putting that fact in?
There are a lot of facts that weren't put in about the case, and I could have gone down the road of trying to adjudicate the case with materials that were evident, or were presented, or were leaked, or were suggested. There's a tremendous online bit of evidence and counter-evidence about the case. At the end of the day, only 3 people know what happened: Julian and the 2 women. The case had been mocked and vilified by Julian and his supporters. The only goal of that section of the film was to indicate that actually there is some reason to think that there was a case, and indeed the British courts have agreed with. Excuse me. Let me finish. I did not find him guilty on the screen. There's nothing in the narration that says he was guilty of anything. The British courts have agreed that these allegations, if proven, would be crimes in Great Britain as well as in Sweden. They found that twice. Indeed, there was a 3rd adjudication of the case. So, in point of fact, all the film is doing is not to say Julian Assange is guilty of anything. It's simply to say that these are serious allegations which deserve to be taken seriously. And I believe that they do deserve to be taken seriously, and that Julian Assange is not above the law. The film in no way, shape, or form takes any position as to Julian Assange's guilt or innocence.
You've told one side of the story, while someone hasn't even been allowed to tell their side yet.
I'm sorry, Julian Assange had a great opportunity to tell his side of the story by vilifying the Swedish women and ridiculing the case. He did it over and over and over again.
Okay, where's the microphone now? Is there anyone else who wants to come in? The one here. Yep.
Hi, Alex. Spawn. I'm interested particularly in how you seem to have concluded, and I think it's quite key in your argument, that Julian isn't at risk for being extradited to the US. And I'm just wondering how you concluded that risk wasn't great, and whether you still think that is the case now that we've got Edward Snowden out there and stuff like that.
Well, I should say that Julian may have put himself at greater risk by involving himself in the Snowden case, which of course came after this. But my own view, and again, as far as I put it in the film, I indicated a number of things in the film. First of all, that there is a grand jury investigation. There is a grand jury investigation into Julian Assange, and well, we don't know if it's into Julian Assange, but certainly into WikiLeaks, and a number of people have been contacted, and witnesses have been contacted. So that's a serious investigation. That having been said, I should also say that I know about a number of grand jury investigations on other subjects I've done films about, which were subsequently dropped. So the fact that there is a grand jury investigation doesn't indicate that there's been an indictment. Also, the point here in the film, one of the points was simply to say that actually, there's a contention that he is at greater risk of being extradited if he were to go to Sweden. All of the experts that I've discussed this with feel strongly, including Helena Kennedy, that he's actually of far lesser risk were he to go to Sweden than were he to be attempted to be extradited from this country. So, A, he's not been indicted. B, if he were to go to Sweden, he'd be under less risk than he would be in this country. That's the view of the film. And so the question is, why would he go to the Ecuadorian embassy? I do believe that Julian feels he's at risk, but I don't believe that he's
Isn't that quite relevant? I mean, is it unreasonable to believe that Julian reasonably thinks he's at risk? I mean, do you think the Americans will get him one day? And also that there is this point that if he went to Sweden, he'd almost certainly end up in jail and lose an opportunity to claim asylum.
I'm not sure that he would end up in jail. I think there's a good opportunity that were he to go to Sweden, he would be found innocent of these charges.
I agree with you, but at the same time, shouldn't we reasonably understand his perspective on this? I believe he is likely, almost certain, to go to jail initially. And when I've spoken to people, they said that would happen, which then he would lose his opportunity to claim asylum, because you can't claim asylum from jail, which I think is pertinent. But also, I remember we had a conversation. You remember you interviewed me? Didn't put much in. You could have put much great stuff, but there we are. No, I mean, you did say that. I mean, you then seemed convinced that, or I got the impression that you seemed convinced that extradition wasn't likely. And I just wondered, I just never quite understood why you think that's the case, and I'm not sure you fully answered that. I mean,
you said there was an indictment 2 minutes ago.
No, I didn't.
You did. You said there's no indictment. I heard you say it.
I'm sorry. I said there is no indictment.
But
Correct.
you can't say that. We don't know whether there's an indictment or not. You can't say that. You're not the Supreme Court.
Okay, you're right. I do not know for a fact whether there is an indictment. Nobody knows for a fact whether there is an indictment.
Then
The
don't
film.
say there is.
Sorry, I'm speaking.
Don't apologize to me.
Oh,
Okay.
enough already. You know, the point is that
On Vaughan's point, what is your view? You're saying, Vaughan, that you have the impression that you think there will be no extradition.
well, I just think it's quite critical, isn't it? Because if there is genuinely no threat of extradition or no threat to Julian from America, of course he'd go to Sweden. But if there is, one can understand it.
But I understand. Julian feels that there is a threat of extradition. All I'm saying is right now there has been proffered, let me put it that way, there has been proffered no indictment. I mentioned that there is a rumor of a secret indictment, but that's all it is. It's a rumor. There is no indictment publicly made against Julian Assange at this moment. So Julian may feel that he's at risk of extradition because he might be indicted, and therefore he might be extradited. The film goes to great pains to say that it's easier to extradite him from the United Kingdom than it is from Sweden.
Okay.
Okay. So the question is, do you think it's reasonable? I don't think. I think it's reasonable for Julian to think that there are some people in the United States that have it in for him.
Do you think there are?
Yeah, of course there are. And I think there wouldn't have been, Eric Holder wouldn't have stood up there, and you wouldn't have Senator Joe Lieberman behaving in a reprehensible way to shut down the payments to WikiLeaks, even though, MasterCard and Visa do all these other things.
You'll accept that if he genuinely feared, and it's not unreasonable that he would end up in a prison cell if he went to Sweden, and you can't claim political asylum, which he's been granted in Ecuador, by the Ecuadorians, that's pertinent.
It's pertinent to him. I mean, I'm just saying there's no evidence at the moment that he has been indicted, and there's no evidence that he would be more likely to.
Okay. I think we've done that. So there's.
I know a number of people who have been threatened to have been indicted by the United States and have been the subject of grand jury investigations, and they did not. Excuse me. Bradley Manning was charged in a military court. There are a number of people who have been threatened with indictment and who have been the subject of grand jury investigations. They did not seek asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy.
There's a microphone at the back, is that right? No, decided not to? Right, who'd like? Yep.
I asked a question, but you answered it subsequently.
Okay, there's one here.
By putting my hand up.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Naomi Colvin, UK Friends of Bradley Manning. Given what's happened in the past few weeks and the appearance of another extraordinary whistleblower, Edward Snowden, who I think in all important respects is actually extremely similar to Bradley Manning, does this put the really quite extensive focus on Bradley Manning's private life and personal troubles in this film? Do you think that puts it in a different light, or would you reconsider that a bit?
No, I wouldn't, and here's why. I've been asked this question a number of times, and here's why I feel the material that's included in the film about Bradley Manning's life is relevant and important. First of all, this is a film about WikiLeaks, and one of the key features of WikiLeaks was the anonymous electronic Dropbox, the idea that you could leak anonymously. But there's a mystery at the heart of this then. If it was a perfect machine system, why is it that we know who Bradley Manning is? Why is it that it didn't work to keep Bradley Manning anonymous? One of the reasons is that Bradley Manning felt he had a need to talk to somebody. And he reached out to Adrian Namo, not only because Adrian Lamo was a hacker who appeared to be a supporter of WikiLeaks, but also because he was openly bisexual. And Bradley Manning says that in his chats. I know about you being bi. So these issues were important to Bradley to talk about, and indeed he talks about them at great length. That's one issue. Issue number two is, if I hadn't mentioned anything in Bradley Manning's chats about this quite extensive material, he talks about his own personal life in those chats with Adrian Lamo, which had already been previously published at Wired, I would have been under great risk and attack by the other side, shall we say, for not having included any of that information, as if I was trying to hide something. Third, I feel it's terribly important when it comes to whistleblowers and people of conscience, of which I believe Bradley Manning is one, that we not regard them as super people or super beings, but as human beings. Bradley Manning had a lot of human concerns. You'll see from the material that I included in the chats that I don't believe in any way, shape, or form what the military said, which is that Bradley Manning leaked because he was troubled. I believe he leaked because he had a political conscience, and he felt that this material needed to be shown to the world, and that he felt he was doing a larger good by so doing. But I do also think that he's a human being with flaws, and in some ways deeply inspiring. And I think for us to ignore that would be to end up playing into the hands of those who would attempt to silence people, or the idea that somehow we have to be Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King in order to be able to do something great. I think average people can do extraordinary things no matter what their flaws. So for all those reasons, and we agonized about this a lot in the making of the film, we decided to include those materials.
You done? Yeah. Let's go to the back. Yeah, there.
I'm Jean Whalen. I'm a reporter with the Wall Street Journal. Just curious what you make of the Snowden leak generally, what you think of the significance of the leak is and the material he put out there, and also your thoughts on WikiLeaks' role in trying to help him now, the last couple of days. What do you make of that as well?
I think the Snowden leak is extraordinary. It's extraordinary, it's very important, and it's very valuable. And I think Snowden is a very important whistleblower. I do think that in some ways there's much that Snowden has leaked that we already knew. For those who've read James Bamford's books about the NSA, or even the Wired articles by James Bamford, a lot of this was known. But what Snowden has done is he's confirmed it with internal documents for the NSA. So I think it's terribly, terribly important. In terms of the recent, the Wall Street Journal actually has just reported further on the issue of WikiLeaks' involvement in the Snowden case. I fear that the WikiLeaks involvement in that case may end up not being good for WikiLeaks and not being good for Edward Snowden. It appears that actually the President Correa did not authorize, or it was not properly authorized for him to have conduct through Moscow to Ecuador. And so he may be stuck in Moscow now, or in the transit area of Moscow for some time. But I don't know any more than what I read in the Wall Street Journal or other newspapers, because I'm not an insider on that story.
There's one down here. Yeah. Just wait. Just wait. The microphone is coming in. Take a second. There we are.
Sarah Saunders. I'm a chef. Average person. Maybe.
Oh, yes.
Maybe.
You make delicious food.
Thank you. What were your expectations, may I ask, in making this film? Did you have clear expectations about the film in terms of how it would
I was interested in this film because I was interested in, initially, again from afar, I was interested in Julian Assange as somebody who was a young man with a laptop traveling the world who was seeking to expose abuses of power. That's why I was interested in the film, and that's why I wanted to make it.
Yep.
I was uncomfortable at Sundance when I saw this film, and I didn't know why. So watching it again, I'm really uncomfortable because, I'm Madeleine Most. I work at the Foreign Press Association in Paris, but a bunch of us here have worked in documentaries most of our life, and I'm disappointed that somebody from Britain didn't make this film and who lives in the Frontline Club, because you don't know this person. And the rules of documentary, if you're going to interview somebody, unless they're dead, or we couldn't get to Klaus Barbie but you have to know the person, you have to interview the person, and you've come in on your rollerblades from America, taking on a subject that is so serious and needs a lot of research. You don't put any context into it. You don't put in that nobody, well, Woodward, yeah, I believe Cy Hirsch when I read his articles, but you didn't make your documentary in a scientific way or in a well-researched way. You made it like People magazine. I'm sorry, you live in America, but you showed Julian in such a negative way. If you count the amount of footage that you make him look like an idiot on a dance floor, I go at Sundance and everywhere else for a dance too. Everyone in this room does, and you show him being made up you did all those things. Then you did the whole sexual side of Bradley Manning. You didn't put into context how the world changed, that we have a whistleblower because we're in deep shit. Every day we're finding out how our lives are controlled. You didn't say that this person broke it open, and now we have another whistleblower, and another one, and another one, and everybody's going to stand up now because our lives have been destroyed. You're just showing us something that belongs in American television, all the Fox News. I'm sorry, this is not a serious documentary, and it doesn't belong in Britain. Somebody from Britain who's trained in investigative journalism and would need 5 years to make this film. You can't whip this off in 2 years. You don't have half of the information there.
Thank you for your comment. I don't know how to respond to that. I mean,
It's American People magazine.
Okay,
as
thank you.
journalism.
I disagree.
Okay. There we are. There's one here. Yep.
Was your motivation in vilifying Assange? I mean, you would admit that you do portray him as a total villain from the beginning of
I
this
disagree.
film. Well,
I totally disagree.
It's a fair enough approach to see it as that. He does look like a bit of a villain. But I'm just saying, was that motivated? Because as a documentary filmmaker, I completely sympathise with the need for drama, for personal hooks, and so on. Were you motivated by that kind of feeling that you need a good story, you need goodies and baddies?
This is a perfectly legitimate question.
Yeah, so I think it's a legitimate
what about
question.
the issue of the portrayal of
Or was
Assange
it
and the
about being
archive?
snubbed? Or was it about being
The archive you
snubbed that allowed you to?
Okay. The portrayal of Assange in the archive I selected. Good question. I think actually, my job, as I stated earlier, let me put this in a slightly different context. I did a film about clerical sex abuse in the Catholic Church called Mea Maxima Culpa. I requested a number of interviews with Catholic officials. I was denied those interviews. They did not want to talk to me. I nevertheless made the film. I believe I talked to a number of people who properly represented some aspects of the Curia in ways that were right and proper. So I don't think it's always necessary to interview the person in order to create an accurate portrayal, number one. Number two, I think that there are times when people decline to be interviewed because that's a way of exercising control over a documentary. That's what people in power do. This is in some way what Julian Assange did. In terms of choosing the archive for Julian Assange, I actually was rather careful about choosing some rather positive archive. I spent a great deal of time. I made a deal with the Australian filmmaker Mark Davis, who followed Julian Assange prior to and during the Afghan Warlog publication, which of course you can see a lot of footage represented here in the Frontline Club. I think, and most people who don't feel so strongly about Julian Assange and the fact that he should be a figure above criticism, believe that those images shot by Mark Davis and the rather positive view that Mark Davis has about Julian Assange actually show him in a pretty positive light. And for the first half of the film, Julian Assange looks like a world beater, looks great, which frankly, I think that's part of the portrayal of Julian Assange. I have tremendous admiration for what he did. And I think I included that in the film. And by the way, I think I also properly included the impact of the Afghan war logs, the impact of the Iraq war logs, and the impact of the leak of the State Department cables. All that is in the film. So I think I actually chose a good variety of archival images and worked in great detail, particularly in the case with Mark Davis, to be sure that that footage was presented exactly in the context as it was photographed.
Yep.
I just wanted to say, if you really wanted to show him in true life. You wouldn't portray him as a superstar, because Julian Assange, if he wanted to be a superstar, he would become a politician. He wouldn't go, he wouldn't just open his documents, his work talks for him. He actually goes into great pain not to put his personal slant on the things. And I think you let him down on that point.
Julian Assange, I would like to point out, is becoming a politician.
If you knew him better, you know he was a shy, quiet person.
Yeah, there's one at the back there, yeah. Just that. That's it.
Hi, my name's Anke Ludeker. I also work in documentaries. I just wanted to say, because there's been such extremes of opinion expressed, that I came to this film with an open mind about Julian Assange, and I leave with an open mind. The film just makes me want to maybe read some more on my own, so thank you.
Thank you.
We've got 5 minutes if anyone wants to make another. That's a very consensual point to end on. There we are.
Hi, Alex. I went to see Maxima Culpa. I know that this is the wrong film, but you did mention it. That was quite a controversial film and controversial timing. Forget about the storyline, how you told, and so on. What was the result of showing that film? What came back to you after the wide? It could always be wider, but viewing that it got, and some of the news investigations and interviews with Jon Snow and so on and so forth. What did you feel you got from that film?
In other words, what was the impact? Well, I'd like to think that the Pope resigned a week after it was first broadcast on HBO, but that's probably a coincidence.
Yeah, spooky coincidence, right?
But I think that, generally the film was well received, both here, Ireland, America, and Italy. In the United States, I was roundly attacked by the Catholic League, which stands up to defend the Catholic Church in most instances. But other than that, I've emerged unscathed.
I think I saw one other hand. Yes, there we are. There are a couple now. Okay.
Susan Ben. I would just say that I would recommend to people who have an open mind and who are interested in evidence that you read a book called Cyberpunks, which is a conversation between Julian and 3 very intelligent people who debate the issues that brought Edward Snowden to the point where he is risking his life to say what he says. And also, I would say that it's more important for everyone to really look for evidence rather than watch films like this.
Okay, and there's one more at the back there. Yeah. Let's just go to the back, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Silky. There was quite an emphasis in the film, I thought, on the lack of redactions or alleged lack of redactions in some of the leaks, and a repetition of some of the allegations that was made in the mainstream media about then that causing harm or certainly posing risk. But it didn't. And now that we're a few years down the line, we have the benefit of knowing that there was no harm that came to anyone. So do you think that it was important for the film that you repeated the allegations of a kind of hysterical media to that end?
I actually think the redaction section was terribly important. And I feel that it may be the most complete portrait of that moment with the Afghan war logs, which I assume is what you're talking about, than has been presented to date, because it got all the participants that I know of involved. Now, I agree with you that there was no harm done. There was no blood on anybody's hands as a result of the failure to redact. However, the damage that was done is the damage that Nick Davis suggests that was done, which was it allowed the American national security state to isolate Julian Assange and to separate him out from the New York Times, The Guardian, and Der Spiegel. And in that sense, a great moment, in my view, was lost. But I also think that, that was a moment in which there was a lot of chaos, and it's not surprising in a way that the redactions weren't properly made considering the pressure that Julian and others were under. But I do think that a tremendous amount of damage were done and allowed a certain group of people who had no interest in those leaks being talked about to marginalize Assange and to change the frames of the debate. And that's why I think it ends up being terribly important. So that's my view.
Yep, just come back here.
Just perhaps what I found confusing is that it was in that article that Julian's pictured holding that I think it says in that article that there's some information that hasn't been published because it's been redacted. So as the reader, you're left thinking that some information has been redacted. Is that not the case?
It isn't the case, and it's in the film that they actually decided to withhold 15,000 documents as a way of partially, well, not redacting, but at least removing name or removing articles in which many of the in which the most number of names might have occurred. So I think it's quite clear in the film that 15,000 documents were held back, but it's also clear that at the end of the day, Julian knew that there were names still in the documents and actually asked the New York Times to go to the Pentagon to see if the Pentagon would willingly help Julian redact. And at the end of the day, a number of names were still in the documents. They got this right in the Iraq War logs, and they came up partially because of James Ball with a magnificent computer program to wonderfully redact in a way that was quite powerful. But they didn't get it right in the Afghan war logs, and it caused a political problem which allowed the Pentagon and others to isolate Julian Assange, which is precisely what needed to be done, because according to American law, from their perspective, because according to American law, there was no problem here in terms of the New York Times, the Guardian, and Der Spiegel publishing these documents. And so long as Julian could have the political cover to be with them, then it would have been very difficult to isolate him.
Okay, we're going to have one more question before we go. Here we are.
My name is Bob Ward. I work at London School of Economics. I wanted to come back to that point about the way in which the newspapers that were originally collaborating with WikiLeaks have essentially got off scot-free. And I was wondering whether you tried to explore to what extent the New York Times might have been doing deals with the State Department in order to escape any further attention. Did you try and interrogate that relationship and got nowhere with it, or what happened there?
No, I actually looked into it. But here's the point. I think I put in what I believe happened. That is to say, I do think that the New York Times acted hypocritically and also sought to distance itself from Julian Assange, in part by calling him a source rather than a partner. And also, I think they were threatened in terms of, as an organization, by this new kind of approach. And we know that the New York Times deals with a lot of unsavory sources, mobsters, for example, and yet they didn't go out of their way to vilify his personal appearance in a way that they did in the case of Julian Assange. So I believe that in the case of Assange, that the New York Times did act hypocritically. But I don't think they needed to do any backdoor deal with the State Department. The fact is that the Obama administration didn't really want to pick a fight with the New York Times. That would have been stupid for them to do so. And had the alliance held, had the Pentagon not been able to isolate Julian Assange, I think they would have had a much more difficult time in terms of going after him to the extent that they have.
Thank you very much indeed for taking all those questions, for putting the questions and for taking them too. We're very grateful.
Thank you very much for hosting.